Hey friends, welcome back to day 5 in Mercy Creek. Today, we're going to be discussing a lesson that comes from the most unforgettable moment in the New Testament. In John 13, Jesus knew who he was. He knew where he came from. He knew where he was going. And because he knew he had all authority, he did something no one expected. He got up from the table. He wrapped a towel around his waist, and he washed his disciples' feet. That is not how the world usually defines greatness, is it? The world says greatness means being noticed, being served, being important, being above the work no one else wants to do. But Jesus, well, Jesus showed us something different. In his kingdom, greatness bends down, greatness serves. Greatness picks up the towel. And on Monday morning in Mercy Creek, after everything that happened in the church yesterday, that lesson began in the church basement. Sunday had changed something. Eli Harper had sat in the back pew, and for once, the town had not pushed him out. Pastor Caleb had told the church that it was not a museum for polished people. It was a hospital for wounded people. Hank Miller had made room beside him for his brother Sam. Nobody pretended everything was fixed, but something holy had cracked open. By Monday morning, Pastor Caleb wanted to protect it. He had barely slept. He'd sat in the church office with a notebook open, writing ideas for outreach, prayer nights, community meals, youth ministry, family repair, grief supports, and about 12 other things one tired pastor thought he could somehow carry at once. Then Ruth Caldwell knocked on the door. "Pastor," she said gently, "the basement is flooded." Caleb closed his eyes. Of course it is. The storm from Saturday had left water seeping through the old foundation. The fellowship hall carpet was soaked. Folding chairs were stacked crooked against the wall. The smell of mildew had already started rising from the corners. And the church was supposed to host a community meal that evening. Within an hour, people had gathered. Grace came from the diner with coffee and biscuits. Lily carried a roll of paper towels almost as big as she was. Nora Reyes arrived after working another early shift at the clinic. Deputy Reed, well, he came in uniform. Ruth brought gloves. Hank came with tools. Sam came with him, which made half the room look twice. Eli stood near the stairwell, hands in his hoodie pocket, unsure if he was allowed to belong on a Monday just because he had been welcomed on Sunday. And Jesus, well, Jesus was already there. No one had seen him arrive. He was in the far corner of the basement, kneeling on the wet floor with a towel in his hands, wiping muddy water from beneath the lowest shelf. Pastor Caleb froze halfway down the stairs. "Lord," he said softly. Jesus looked up. "Good morning, Caleb." "You don't have to do that." Jesus smiled. "That is why I can." Nobody moved for a moment. It is one thing to talk about serving. It's another thing to see Jesus on his knees in a church basement, cleaning up water that smelled like dirt and old carpet. Caleb hurried down the rest of the stairs. "Please, let me." Jesus handed him a towel. "Then join me." That was not the answer that Caleb expected. He thought Jesus might rescue him from the mess. Instead, Jesus invited him into it. So Caleb knelt beside him, The pastor of the church down on the floor, wiping mud from the baseboards. Hank set his toolbox down. "Well," he muttered, "if the preacher's on the floor, I guess nobody's too fancy." Sam reached for a mop. Hank glanced at him. For a second, old tension passed between them. Then Hank said, "Use the gray bucket. Blue one leaks." Sam nodded. Still, still. It was not much, but sometimes forgiveness begins with practical information. Across the room, Nora tried to lift a wet rug by herself. Grace saw her and stepped in. "Nora, let me help. I've got it." "I know you do," Grace said. "That's not the point." Nora stopped. Those were almost the same words Jesus had spoken to her at Miller's Market on day one. She let Grace take one side of the rug. Together, they carried it outside. Eli stood near the stairwell watching. Lily walked over and handed him a towel. "You can help," she said. Eli looked at the towel. "Did your mom tell you to ask me?" "No." "Did Jesus?" "No." "Then why?" Lily shrugged. "Because you're standing there?" Eli almost smiled. He took the towel. Deputy Reed saw him kneel near the chairs and begin wiping mud from the legs. For a moment, the deputy looked like he wanted to say something formal. Maybe an apology. Maybe encouragement. Maybe the kind of sentence adults use when they are uncomfortable with their own guilt. But he did not. He simply knelt a few feet away and started working too. That was better. The basement filled with the sounds of service. Buckets sliding, mops ringing, chairs scraping, Grace laughing when Lily splashed her own shoes, Ruth telling Hank he was using the wrong kind of rag, Hank telling Ruth he had fixed engines more complicated than a church basement, Ruth telling him engines did not impress her. For a little while, Mercy Creek did not look like a town divided by old wounds. It looked like a family cleaning up after a storm. Pastor Caleb watched it all, and then he quietly said, "This is what I keep missing." Jesus looked at him. "What is that?" Caleb held the wet towel in both hands. "I keep thinking leadership means holding everything together." Jesus said, "Sometimes leadership means being the first one willing to kneel." Caleb looked around the room. "I wanted to build something big after yesterday. A movement, a plan, a ministry." Jesus nodded. "Those may come, but this came first." "Yes." Caleb looked down at the towel. "The floor." Jesus said, "The towel often comes before the platform." That sentence settled into him. The towel often comes before the platform. Near the storage closet, Hank and Sam were trying to move a heavy table. "You're lifting too fast," Hank snapped. Sam let go. "And you're still talking to me like I'm 17. The room went quiet. Hank's face hardened. Then he looked across the basement and saw Jesus watching him. Not condemning him, just seeing him. Hank breathed out. "You're right," he said. Sam blinked. Hank looked back at the table. "I'm sorry." It was not the big apology, not yet, but it was the first clean brick in a broken wall. Sam picked up his side again. "On three." Hank nodded. "1, 2, 3." Together they lifted it. By noon, the basement was cleaner than it had been in years. The community meal could still happen. But something more important had happened first. People who had been waiting to be healed had started serving one another while they were still healing. Jesus rinsed his hands in the utility sink. Caleb stood beside him. I thought yesterday was about welcoming the wounded, Caleb said. It was. And today? Jesus picked up the towel and wrung it out slowly. Today is about what welcomed people do next. Caleb waited. Jesus said, they serve. Upstairs, Grace set out coffee in the fellowship hall. Ruth wrote a sign for the evening meal. Nora called two patients who needed rides. Deputy Reed carried trash bags to the curb. Eli helped Lily stack chairs, pretending he did not care when she told him he was doing a good job. Hank and Sam stood near the old church furnace, both of them dirty, tired, and quiet. Finally, Sam said, thanks for letting me come today. Hank stared at the furnace. I didn't exactly invite you. No, Hank swallowed. But I didn't tell you to leave. Sam looked at him. No, you didn't. For now, that was enough. That evening, the church basement filled with people. Not because the carpet was perfect. It was not. Not because the walls were beautiful. They were not. Not because Mercy Creek had suddenly become holy. It had not. But because something about the room felt different. The people serving the food were the same people who had needed mercy all week. Grace, who was afraid of losing the diner. Nora, who was tired of always being wrong. Eli, who was learning he could still belong. Deputy Reed, who was learning justice needed tenderness. And Pastor Caleb, who was learning ministry begins lower than ambition wants to go. For Hank and Sam, who were not fully reconciled, but no longer standing on opposite sides of every room. And Jesus, well, Jesus moved among them quietly, refilling cups, carrying plates, listening, not taking the head table, not asking to be honored, just serving. At the end of the night, Lily found the towel folded over the back of a chair. She picked it up and carried it to Grace. Mom, she whispered, I think this is his. Grace looked across the room. Jesus was helping Eli carry a box of canned goods into the pantry. Grace smiled softly. Then leave it there. Why? Grace looked at the towel. Because maybe we need the reminder. So they left it. A simple towel, folded over a chair in a church basement. And that became the lesson of day 5. Jesus did not come to teach us how to look important. He came to show us how to love low, to bend down, to serve quietly, to carry what needs carrying, to clean what needs cleaning, to help without needing applause. Because in the kingdom of God, the towel is not beneath us. The towel is the way. And maybe today, Jesus is not asking us to wait for a bigger calling. Maybe he's asking us to notice the wet floor, the tired person, the heavy table, the quiet need, the work nobody wants. And maybe he's saying what he showed us and his disciples long ago. If you want to follow me, do not be afraid to kneel. Tomorrow is day 6, and Mercy Creek is about to face a harder test, because it is one thing to serve people when everyone is watching. It's another thing to show mercy when the town wants judgment. And Jesus, well, Jesus is not finished with Mercy Creek yet. So I'll see you here tomorrow for day 6. My name is Douglas Vandergraph, and I believe in Jesus Christ. God bless every single one of you. Every single one.